coming up, one of the greatest voices in rock and soul history, the man who Island Records founder Chris Blackwell called Ray Charles on helium. Started out as a young kid in 3 different highly influential bands from the 60s into the 70s. Then as a solo artist in the 80s, he had several #1 hits that helped people rediscover his incredible gift. We also count down his 5 greatest songs next on Professor of Rock, brought to you by Zenni Eyewear. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. I tell you what, if you love music, we do this every single day. Click the subscribe button. You'll want to be a part of this community and head over to our Patreon to join the mission of keeping this history. Now reflect on a time that you've been stunned with the talent of a precocious youngster that left you with the impression that you've just witnessed future greatness. That was exactly how audiences felt when seeing the performance of a diminutive child prodigy in the late 50s and early 60s named Stevie Winwood. Famed producer and founder of Island Records, Chris Blackwell, said that hearing Stevie Winwood was like Ray Charles on helium. I love that quote. Winwood was born into a very musical family in Handsworth, Birmingham, England. He began playing the piano at the age of 4, mimicking 30s and 40s dance ditties that his father fancied. By the time he was 8 years old, Stevie Winwood was already playing with his dad and his older brother Muff in the Ron Atkinson band. At 12, he was smuggled into pubs to play the piano with Muff and his friends. The piano actually had to be turned backwards on the stage so that Stevie's back was to the audience to hide the fact that he was well under the legal age to be playing in a pub. As a teenager in the Birmingham, England R&B scene, Winwood played a Hammond C3 organ and was called upon to back up such luminaries as John Lee Hooker, B.B. King, Chuck Berry, and Bo Diddley. Incredible. Winwood modeled his magnificent singing style after the aforementioned Ray Charles. He developed a high tenor vocal range. Stevie loved Ray's phrasing and his ability to segue effortlessly from one genre to the next. It was a skill that Steve Winwood perfected as a teenager. The great Billy Joel recalls the moment that he first saw Steve Winwood perform. He said, and I quote, "I thought he was the greatest singer, the skinny little English kid singing Ray Charles," end of quote. Joel also called Steve Winwood his favorite piano player, which, of course, a huge compliment coming from the piano man himself. Steve Winwood made a welcome appearance later on Billy Joel's 1986 album, The Bridge. He played the Hammond B3 on the song Getting Closer. Winwood joined the Spencer Davis group at the age of 14. Spencer Davis, the late Spencer Davis, he heard Stevie imitating legendary blues singer Jimmy Reed, and he could not believe what he was hearing. After a 3-year run with the Spencer Davis group, Winwood teamed with guitar hero Eric Clapton and the eccentric virtuoso Ginger Baker in 1967 for a one-off project called Eric Clapton and the Powerhouse. In the spring of '67, Winwood met musician Jim Capaldi, Chris Wood, and Dave Mason at the Elbow Room, a club in Aston, Birmingham. Capaldi and Mason were in a Birmingham band named Deep Feeling, and Wood was a member of another Birmingham act called Locomotive. The Birmingham Fab foursome instantly clicked, and they formed Traffic, a group, of course, held as one of the most important progressive rock bands of the late 60s and early 70s. In spite of their acclaim, though, the tenure of Traffic was quite tenuous. After just 2 studio albums, the group dissolved, and Steve Winwood had another go-around with Eric Clapton and Ginger Baker, assembling the supergroup Blind Faith. But Blind Faith only released 1 album and executed only 1 live tour, but man, what a glorious one-off. Blind Faith was celebrated as one of the greatest supergroups in rock history, as I said. Just incredible. Winwood then reunited with Capaldi and Wood for a reunion album as Traffic in 1970, followed by 3 more studio albums, including the esteemed LP The Low Spark of High-Heeled Boys. That was in 71. Perhaps the nonstop whirlwind of the rock and roll lifestyle that he had lived since he was a young lad took a toll on Steve Winwood, and he actually opted to stop touring and worked solely as a hired studio musician. And Traffic broke up for the second time in 1974. Winwood established himself as an accomplished keyboardist and guitarist. He was constantly approached about doing session work. Everybody wanted a piece of the Winwood brilliance for their records. He played the organ on Hendrix's Voodoo Child, while still a member of Traffic, and performed on music for, there was George Harrison, Lou Reed, Marianne Faithfull, David Gilmour, like I said, Billy Joel, Phil Collins, Paul Weller, and Slash, among many others. Steve Winwood came back from his hiatus with an inconsequential self-titled solo album in '77, but he had a major rejuvenation with his second solo album, Arc of a Diver, in 1980, one of my favorites. Arc of a Diver catapulted Winwood into a new generation of fans and paved the way for his massive breakthrough LP, Back in the High Life, in '86, one of my favorites of the decade. He was nominated twice for Best British Male Vocalist at the Brit Awards in '88 and '89. He became a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee as a co-founding member of Traffic in 2004. He is one of the most versatile vocalists of the rock era, bar none. A real renaissance man that he's mastered R&B, psychedelic, jazz, progressive rock, blues, and pop. Steve Winwood's voice alone makes him a legend with a capital L. It's as pure as the driven snow. Incomparable and transcendent. Having said that, here is my Steve Winwood Fiverr, starting with a few honorable mentions. How do you pick 5 out of all these bands and all these things he's done? But number 5, from 1987, Valerie. Cool like jazz on a summer's day. Valerie is one of many golden compositions from the writing partnership of Winwood and Will Jennings. Now, Will Jennings, he wrote lyrics, and Winwood composed the music for many amazing songs in their collaborative treasure chest. With the wind in her arms. Valerie was an homage to a real person. Although Will Jennings has never officially divulged the identity of the person who was the subject of Valerie, it is believed to have been written about singer-songwriter Valerie Carter, who was a dear friend of Will Jennings. Valerie Carter was a member of the band Howdy Moon in the early 70s, and she released several solo albums the latter part of the decade. She was also a highly sought-after background singer that sang on recordings by Linda Ronstadt, Don Henley, Christopher Cross, and Jackson Browne, among many others. Valerie Carter also wrote the Judy Collins 1973 top 40 hit, Cook with Honey. Reportedly, Jackson Browne wrote his song. That girl could sing about Valerie Carter as well. She obviously had an impact on the people that knew her, especially the artists that she worked with. Valerie had a brilliant career ahead of her until she spiraled into heavy drug use, sadly, and her life was marred by poor health and brushes with the law until her death in 2017. That was the premise of Will Jennings' tribute to his friend. The song Valerie was released as a single 3 times, actually. Seemed to have more lives than a cat. The first release of the single was from Winwood's 1982 LP, Talking Back to the Night. The 82 release stiffed at number 51 in the UK and only number 70 on the Billboard Hot 100. For the second release, Valerie was remixed and dropped as a single from Winwood's Chronicles album in 1987. Valerie's second coming was a charm, with the remix version climbing to number 19 in the UK and number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100. The third release of Valerie was another remix version in 2004, this time by Swedish DJ Eric Prydz, and retitled Call on Me. The 2004 remix included re-recorded vocals by Winwood to fit Prydz's computerized pulsating dance interpretation. Winwood was a big fan of the reworking, I guess, and very enthusiastic about providing new vocals. Call on Me was a massive international hit, shooting all the way to number 1 in the UK, Germany, and throughout most of Europe. Number 4, from 1967, Dear Mr. Fantasy. What an epic song, man. The title track to Traffic's debut album, although the record was retitled to Heaven Is In Your Mind for the US release, Dear Mr. Fantasy is a fine exemplar of Steve Winwood's multifaceted ability to skillfully perform vocals in virtually any genre. In Dear Mr. Fantasy, Winwood delivers an interesting vocal performance that blends blues, folk, and psychedelia with a mysteriously distant tone layered over his spirited guitar riffs, Dave Mason's harmonica. Winwood is known primarily as a keyboardist, especially for his exceptional organ playing, but I gotta tell you, Steve Winwood is also an incredible guitar player. In fact, Jim Capaldi once called Winwood his favorite guitarist of all time. We get an excellent demonstration of Winwood's guitar prowess in Dear Mr. Fantasy. As with many recordings that feature Steve Winwood, Dear Mr. Fantasy has had its share of multi-generational pop culture, most notably featured in the opening scene, Marvel Studios' Avengers Endgame. Number 3, Gimme Some Lovin', the soul-injected classic that Steve performed and penned during his 3-year stint with the Spencer Davis Group, a band originated in 1963 by the late great guitarist Spencer Davis. The Spencer Davis Group was intended to record reworked R&B tracks that the band members loved, but were not well known by the mass public. The band scored #1 hits in the UK with covers of 2 Jackie Edwards songs, Keep On Runnin' in '65, Somebody Help Me in early '66. Winwood still referred to as Stevie Winwood. He was only 14 when he joined the Spencer Davis Group and was only 17 when he delivered one of the most iconic vocal performances of the rock era, when he sang lead on Gimme Some Lovin', of course in 1966. Gimme Some Lovin' evolved from a jam session, I guess, with music primarily created by Spencer Davis, Stevie's brother Muff Winwood. Immediately after hearing the melody, Steve began writing lyrics on his Hammond B3 organ, jumping off with the explosive pleading chorus. The process of completing the song was lightning quick. Gimme Some Lovin' shot to #2 in the UK, #1 in Canada, and #7 on the Billboard Hot 100. Now, interestingly, the first recorded rendering of Gimme Some Lovin' that was released in America was not the original version by the Spencer Davis Group. Actually, the first US release was by an outfit from Baynesville, Pennsylvania, called the Jordan Brothers. The Jordan Brothers' recording of Gimme Some Lovin' generated some early heat, especially, I guess, with airplay in Boston and Baltimore. But the Spencer Davis Group, that original was spiced up a bit with more instrumentation, of course, the soulful background singers, and the Winwood-led Spencer Davis Group version leapfrogged over the Jordan Brothers recording within a few months after it was released in the USA. Gimme Some Lovin' is one of the most recognizable. It's just one of the favorite sing-along tunes in popular music. When it comes on, it's just like you gotta sing along. It moves you. You know, the universal fondness for the tune is in large part because of Steve Winwood's inspired vocal performance. It's even more remarkable considering how young he was on the original recording. You know, Gimme Some Lovin' has been used in countless TV shows, advertisements, and movies, placements in Days of Thunder, Sleepers, Big Chill, there's Notting Hill, and the Blues Brothers, where Belushi and Aykroyd covered the song, and they had a #18 pop hit with their version in 1980. But surprisingly, many people don't associate Steve Winwood with this song because of the way the tune was billed, the Spencer Davis Group. In the US, there wasn't much fanfare about the group or about the wunderkind Stevie Winwood at that time. After the success of Gimme Some Lovin' in '66 and the top 10 single I'm a Man in '67, Steve Winwood would leave the Spencer Davis Group and he moved on to the next chapter in his storied career. #2, Roll With It, Baby. A jazzy pop standout that was Steve Winwood's second #1 single on the Billboard Hot 100 that happened in '88. The tune also topped Billboard's adult contemporary chart for 2 weeks and the mainstream rock chart for a solid month. Winwood's soulfulness soars on Roll With It. He takes his vocal power to another level, passionately projecting in tandem with the legendary Memphis horns, giving Roll With It throwback exhilaration of the early days of Motown. It's as if Winwood summons a lifetime of infatuation with classic R&B into one inspired vocal performance, you know? Winwood was nominated for Best Male Pop Vocal Performance in '89 for Roll With It, and the song was also nominated for Record of the Year. I have to mention that Roll With It has the distinction of being the last #1 song announced by my hero Casey Kasem as the host of the syndicated radio program American Top 40 on August 19, 1988. It was definitely the end of an era for sure. Now, as we go into our #1 spot, we want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear, the only eyewear for me. Click on the link below to design your own pair. You're gonna love it. And #1, Bring Me a Higher Love. Man, Steve Winwood and Will Jennings' grandiose, joyous opus about yearning for the euphoria of transcendental fulfillment. Higher Love was essentially the big breakout solo hit for Winwood. I mean, how could it not be? It's literally a perfect pop song. When I listen to this song, I tell you what, I'm raised to a state of musical exaltation. It's such a beautiful ecstasy of sonic intensity. You can't help but burst into singing. It's likely why Whitney Houston covered it. Where's that higher love I keep thinking of? Although Higher Love missed the top 10 in Winwood's native UK, it peaked at number 13. It was his highest charting solo single in England. It was his first #1 pop single on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1986, and it topped the Billboard Album Rock Tracks chart for 4 weeks. The song, of course, features the incomparable Chaka Khan on background vocals. Tell you, the electrifying union of Steve Winwood and Chaka Khan make Higher Love just a gospel-like celebration. Even after 1,000 listens, the song somehow only gets better. Man, Steve Winwood's brilliant musical arrangement, it's like a unique fusion of Afro-Caribbean rhythms and Celtic melodies. Funk master Nile Rodgers played rhythm guitar on the recording to give Higher Love an infectious groove. Will Jennings wrote those spiritual, galvanizing lyrics. Jennings called Higher Love a modern hymn, and he couldn't be more right. Gospel roots run deep in Jennings' family, actually. His great-grandfather was a preacher in the Methodist Church in Arkansas, and he and his family did a lot of singing in the church they attended in East Texas. Steve Winwood's outstanding, sensational, mesmerizing vocal on Higher Love it earned him the Grammy Award for Best Male Pop Vocal Performance, and the song received the Record of the Year Grammy in 1986. Down in the Heart or Hidden in the Stars Above, the enduring revelry of Higher Love has become a pop culture phenomenon, being used in a list of TV, film, and commercials too long to mention. And to me, it's the 80s pop equivalent of the Hope Diamond. From child prodigy to a Hall of Fame rock and roll troubadour, Steve Winwood has shared his elite gift and passion with a lifetime of timeless R&B, folk, jazz, progressive rock, and pop classics with the world, and has truly brought us all a higher love of the arts because of his boundless gifts. Leave us a comment about Steve Winwood. What is your Steve Winwood Fiverr? If you like this content, we do invite you to subscribe to be a part of our community. To be a part of our exclusive club, the Dean's List, click on our Patreon link to hear the songs in our playlist. The songs that we talked about, we have a playlist below. You can do that. And to get Steve Winwood's music, click on our Amazon links below. Help us keep the music alive, my friends. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth.